in Stillwater State Prison, a young in solitary confinement. Never thought I would see daylight again or be free. One day I heard a young man go by my cell. I looked out to this little peephole. He was an Indian. I started thinking to myself, what's wrong with this guy? Doesn't he know he's in prison? What the heck is he whistling about? And he came and talked to me. He was a full-blooded Anishinaabe person. And he started telling me about this Indian studies program they were going to create there. They found out that every Indian in that institution, and every Indian in every institution in America, in prisons, are in there for alcohol-related crimes. They're in there for the lesser crimes, but they do the most time. They never go to AA. They never go into skilled and technical trades. They never go to take courses in higher education. They just do their time, go out and repeat again, like myself. And they felt, him and a young, white, Caucasian caseworker, of all people, felt that maybe if they could create some type of a program that would bring the Indian inmates together and teach them about their culture, about their traditional way of life, about the drum and the sacred pipe and the use of tobacco and medicines, about their history, all the contributions that were made to modern day society. Maybe they would start feeling good about themselves and want to go on to higher education, skilled and technical trade, start developing pre-release programs, deal with their alcohol and their drugs. They asked me if I would help them organize, because I grew up with every one of these boys, young men. I always had the best football, best softball, best basketball, best boxing team. We excelled in all sports, Indian people. They felt if I could organize the Indians like that, I could certainly organize them to come in to this culture program. And I did it. Out of 210 Indian inmates in that institution, I got 170 of them to join this culture program. And my brother used to draw pictures on the blackboard of the Medewan Lodge of the little boy water drum. Pretty soon we got a drum. Pretty soon the elders come to visit us. In a 3-year period of time, we dropped the average time of an Indian inmate from over 6 years down to 24 months. We started turning people out that never came back. And it was there, as far as I am concerned, it was there that the American Indian movement was born, in solitary confinement in Stillwater Prison. If we can help young men incarcerated, why can't we go out there on the streets, intervene and prevent young people from even getting in to that type of setting? That was the basis of the movement. I was one of the first Native people to work for the Northern States Power Company, a major corporation in Minneapolis. I was the first so-called ex-felon to work for a major corporation in Minneapolis. I studied hard. I came out of Stillwater as a first-class engineer. Had no formal education, never even completed high school. But I learned how to put boilers and turbines and water pumps together to generate electricity. And I came out. I was working, I had a good job. I had an opportunity to go back to school, become a nuclear engineer, run nuclear power plants. Oh, what a polluter I would be today if I followed through on that. But one day I was invited to go to a meeting with Eddie Benton Benes, Dennis Banks, women, mostly women, children, to talk about what was going on with Indian people, the poverty-stricken conditions. Unemployment as high as 94% on me and Devery's reservation, White Earth. Indian people lived to be 43.5 back then. We had a gross annual income of $1,500 a year per capita income nationwide. 65 on a reservation as high as 95% of our children entering the 9th grade were not graduating. And it went down to the alcohol, first form of chemical warfare used against Indian people and what it caused, the heart failure, the diabetes. And we finally formed a little group called the Concerned Indian American Coalition. That's all we were. What are we going to do to change those things? Well, we're small in numbers, so we got to get out in the streets, we got to demonstrate. We've got to become active. When we told people we're going to march against the police force, about half the crowd ran out the door. When we told them we're going to go confront the Minneapolis School Board and demand curricula relevant to Indian children, teach them about their language, their culture, and their contributions that were made to modern day society, people shook their head. There's nothing can be done, they said. Absolutely nothing was being taught in the public and parochial school systems of America back then about Indian culture, Indian tradition, Indian government. Nothing was ever said about the contributions that are made to modern day society. You know, they're finding pyramids down throughout Central and South America that are 3 times larger than the pyramids they find along the Nile, built 200 years before the Roman Empire. There's a major archaeological digging going on. You don't hear about it. I heard about it about a year and a half ago, but you don't hear about it no more. Down by Lima, Peru, where they found these little towns, they're saying cities now, 35 to 50,000 Indian people living in metropolis, had 2-3-story houses. There's a big river that ran through the area, and they built viaducts that came right into these little villages. And off these viaducts, they had little ones that went right into the houses. And the water, when it went through the house, it went back out again. Natural. That they had running water when the Spaniards were still living in caves over in Europe. That's what they're saying. They're looking at the skeletal remains. They can't even understand how Indian people were able to preserve those skeletons that long, buried in a fetal position. And now they're looking at the skulls and they're finding little pinholes, maybe 5-10 years apart. And they're saying Indian people were practicing brain surgery while the Spaniards were still living in caves over in Europe. Medical science has said they haven't come up with a medicine yet that Indian people didn't have, use, and practice. And most of the medicine right now today that we use in the cure ills are coming out of the rainforest, Americas. How come none of that's taught? 70% of all the food that's consumed all over the world was grown right here by Indian people. How come our children don't know that? Don't you think they feel good? Huh? Don't you think they'd want to go to school and be somebody? Don't they feel proud of who they were, their past? Benjamin Franklin, one lived among the great Iroquois Confederacy. He made a very ignorant remark when he came home. He said he couldn't understand how 6 savage nations could live in peace and harmony for hundreds of years without warfare. And he copied their great confederacy, drew up the Federation of States. The very Constitution that we live under today was copied from them. Every tribe had those forms of government and ways of dealing with conflict. Every tribe had they're coining a new phrase now in America, they call it restorative justice. Comes from Indian people, they all had that. The elders, the whole community would come together to settle disputes and bring restorative justice to Indian people. How come they don't teach our children that? 87% of the children right in Minneapolis that are entering the 9th grade today are not graduating. I think they could change that a lot if they just got rid of all this junk curricula. Just teach the truth, nothing else. We don't want nothing but the truth, nothing else. They don't want anything else but the truth. So what I'm saying here, there was a time before those boats came here that all earth here was sacred. It was honored that way. In the Medewan ceremonies, I'm the head Ogichida for the Three Fires Society. I'm the head male warrior dancer. of the Three Fires Society. Every day of the week, they get up at daybreak during the ceremonies. They have a fire that is lit when the camp starts. It's never allowed to go out. Nobody's allowed to throw gum wrappers or empty cigarettes, packs, or anything. That fire is sacred. It represents life. And they give tobacco. You come in, they sage you down when you go into the lodge. And they take your tobacco. The first thing you do when you enter the lodge, you go and offer that tobacco to that fire. And the belief that through the smoke is carried to the Creator. You say your prayer. And when the prayers are all the tobacco, when they set it, they come around, they collect tobacco from every one of you in the lodge. Every one of you are required to carry a little pouch like this, always with you. And I'm not talking about Chesterfields and Marlboros and all that. I'm talking about Kinnickinnick, red willow bark. You're supposed to carry that. That's the way we've been instructed. We smoke it in our pipes. When they come around, they have a song for everything. Everything that they do, they have to sing about it. They sing a song, and these young warriors get up and they dance with the little collection baskets. When the drum ends the song, they run around real fast. They collect tobacco from every single person in that camp. And it's all mixed together. All your prayers and thoughts are mixed together. And they have another song that they sing while they load the pipe. And it's presented to the Grand Chief, and he gets up and prays for that tobacco. He talks to the spirits. And then they smoke those pipes. And when that part is done, the women get up. They take the vessels, the copper vessels, and they too have songs that only women are allowed to sing. Women take care of the water in the Medewan Lodge. They're responsible for it. We come from a belly of water as children when we're born, babies. So they offer that water to the four directions of the universe. And the first drink of water that they give back to Mother Earth. Then they bring that water to everyone in the lodge, and they drink. And while they're drinking that water, one of the elderly women gets up in her Anishinaabe language, along with an interpreter, and they talk about how sacred that water is. And if we don't take care of it, we're all going to perish. There's an old man told me 25 years ago that in my lifetime, the land of the sky blue water in Minnesota, where the Mississippi River starts on my home reservation, he said, in my lifetime, I'll be paying more for a pint of water than I would for a gallon of gasoline. In my lifetime. You can go in any truck stop and you can C-store along the way from Minneapolis to here. You'll pay more sometimes for half a pint of water than you will for a gallon of gasoline. So water is sacred. Very, very sacred. It's the lifeblood. It's the strongest medicine in the world. None of us, no life on earth can survive without it. And the women are the ones, that's their responsibility to take care of that. And shortly after the American Indian movement formed, a farm lady down by Red Wing called me one day. Her daughter was recruited. They have a talented archaeologist program where they go into all the high school and they take the top students. It was funded by Macalester College, University of Minnesota, United States Department of Agriculture. And they take all these students and they go out and they do excavations. And they were excavating a site down by Red Wing in Welch Village. And it was an old, predated 1,500-year-old, they thought it was Winnebago town that they're excavating, a village. They knew exactly where the graves were in that village. And they were instructed not to touch or go into those graves. And they excavated for weeks. And this young girl said they finally got bored. You know, they were drinking at night, parties, smoking a little marijuana. They start daring one another, we ought to go check that grave and see what's in there. So in the middle of the night, they went out and they got their picks and their shovels, and they dug into 3 graves. This young girl, she got scared. She went home, told her mother what happened. Her mother called. I answered the phone. I organized about 15 carloads, Indians and non-Indians, and we drove down. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we got there. They had all their screens and all their little picks and their log books and everything. And they had all these arm bones and leg bones and skulls all stacked up in piles. With the skulls over here, the arm bones here. Had arrowheads, had artifacts, you know, type that was buried with these people stacked up. Some were still in the grave, still digging. We wouldn't let them out. We wouldn't let them out. We had no intention of hurting them in any way. But we made them stay in there, and we shoveled dirt back in up to their waist. Then the sheriff heard about it. The rest of the ones that were on the hill, the women chased them down. They had little switches, not big clubs, little switches. They're kind of switching them. They were running down the hill. And the sheriff showed up. We confiscated all those bones, big cardboard boxes and crates. Took them to the Minnesota State Indian Affairs Commissioner the next day and called a major press conference and announced that we wanted to put a stop to that. And there was no laws against it. Of course, if Clyde Belcourt went into Fort Snelling Military Cemetery in Minneapolis and started digging into those graves, they'd put me in a straitjacket or something and lock me up for life. But there was no laws that could do that. So we got together with a state representative and we proposed a bill. Not that we'd ever carry it out, even if for some reason we got the money. We proposed a bill to the state legislature for $280,000 to do an archaeological digging on the Pioneer Cemetery on Cedar and Lake Street. Of course, the bill had to go through all the committees, so we got to go over there and testify. And we did. It started out as a felony if somebody got caught doing it. Well, first the bill never went through, so then we put another bill in to stop those kinds of digging. It started out as we'd be charged with a felony. Anybody got caught going into an Indian grave and stealing artifacts, skeletal remains, could be charged with a felony. Went through committees, but reduced to a gross misdemeanor. And finally, when it was passed, it was a misdemeanor, a slap on the wrist. People can still today go into graves, take them what they want, market them all over the world, and get away with it. In 1996, a large delegation of us were meeting in Champaign, Illinois, trying to deal with the mascots issue. Chief Lennewick, you've all seen him. There's never been an Indian that played that part. It's a non-Indian. He comes dancing out during halftime. Big war bonnet dragging on the floor. Dances around, kicks his legs up in the air, makes war whoops, then he stops like this. And the crowd goes wild. We went there to hold a rally, hold a weekend workshops and conference to try to put a stop, get them to take that mascot out. We don't want to be a fun for America's fun and games, mascots for America's fun and games anymore. We're the only race of human beings left here in America that's used as mascots today. While we were down there, a non-Indian, a young lady came and she said, "You ought to go down to Bloomington, Illinois." I said, "Oh," I said, "I've heard about that." She said, "Yeah, there's a place called Dixon Mounds down there. You wouldn't believe what's going on there. They got over 100 skeletons of Indian people on public display. And the archaeologists are having a big conference there this weekend. We ought to go down there and confront them." So we organized, we had a big caravan left Champaign, Illinois early in the morning. Arrived there about 90 miles away. We arrived there about 10 o'clock. By the time we got there, they had the whole museum locked down, had security there. We had a ceremony, we prayed, had a drum, we sang together, smoked a pipe. Then we started marching toward the building. By the time we got to the museum, this guy named Dixon in 1924 built this museum on top of a big burial mound about 4 times larger than this building we're in right now, a whole block. He built this museum right on top, several miles off the freeway, so he wasn't getting very much attention. A few years later, he decided maybe to draw a crowd. He built another building about half the size of this right here. He built an extension to the museum right over the burial part where the skeletons were, the corpse. Then he excavated it down, didn't put no floor in it, excavated it down about 5 feet below the bodies, the skeletons, and had them all on public display. Little children buried, holding on to their bones or legs of their mother yet, feathers and beadwork embedded right into their neck and into their body, that decayed. I couldn't believe it. When we marched, this young Indian girl came up, I said, we can't get in. We were frustrated. We thought about even breaking the door down. People were so angry when they were told what was in there. This little Indian girl came up and said, I worked here last summer. Summer program, youth program. I know how to get into the building. So she took off, went into the museum down through the basement, came right up where the graveyard is, and opened the door for us. We all went through, and they had a metal detector you had to go through first to get through into the darkened room. And they had this, just like a concert, they had blue and yellow and green lights shining down on these skeletons. And you go through a metal detector, you pay your money, go through a metal detector, you get to walk around, come back, a railing like that, look at all of the skeletons, look down, and there was popcorn down there, potato chips, gum wrappers, everything. Our people it was unbelievable. Women start screaming and crying. How can they do this? I myself broke down and started crying. Everyone in that room, over 100 Indian people crowded in there, non-Indians were crying. What are we going to do? I went back out to my car and I got my pipe, my bundle, and I brought it back in and I saged the whole place down. We got to pray, I told him. We got to pray and ask the Creator. Mishomish Gitchimai tu Tukanchla. We got to ask Him for direction. What do we do? How do we put a stop to this desecration of our sacred lands, burial grounds? How do we put a stop? When the ceremony was all over, I went over on the railing. I was telling some of my relatives here that story the other day. I went over to the railing and I still didn't know what to do. I was so confused. I couldn't, for the first time in my history, I didn't know how to deal with this issue. And as I was leaning over the railing, I could hear somebody crying. And I looked down. There's a little Indian woman about that big. She had buckskin on. She had a blanket like wrapped around her back, and there was a little baby on her back. And she started speaking Indian to me. I didn't know what she was saying. I didn't know how to speak Indian. I didn't understand what she was saying, but I knew what she was saying. I just knew what she was saying. I looked around, seeing if anybody had, nobody saw, just me. She said, I want to be covered up. I want to be covered up, and she disappeared. And I went back to the crowd, and I told them what happened. Does anybody have shovels? No one had a shovel. Here comes this biker, Hell's Angel, about 50 years old and all scraggly, and Hell's Angel's leather jacket on. He come up, he said, Mr. Belford, I could get you all the shovels you want. I got paranoid. FBI has infiltrated us, you know. I got paranoid. And so I said to him, where are you going to get them? He said, don't worry, it just take me about a half hour. So I took 2 brothers, warriors, and I said, go with him. I didn't trust them. Sure enough, about half hour later, here he comes with a big sleeping bag, about 7 or 8 shovels in there. We started handing out the shovels. Once again, saged everybody down, because I was told that you have to sage everybody down. And when they come out of there, you got to use cedar water. You got to wash them down good when they come out of there. And these little boys, they wanted to go down there and help. 2 little boys, younger than my grandson. So we lowered them down first, held their arms. We didn't know that they had a security system where these lasers went over the bodies, over the skeletons. And deafening sirens went off from all directions. 2 days later, I could still hear the sirens. Then the security came. Brothers were down there shoveling, covering the skeletons up. And little boys were down there with their hands covering up the legs and the bones. They were taking care of the children. They were covering the children back. And it took them about 40 minutes to get all the state troopers there and all the different law enforcement from all the different agencies in and around that county. And they surrounded us. And I told my brother and others, that's enough. Nobody has to be arrested. They were down there with their clubs and their batons and their riot gear and everything. We pulled everybody out there, loaded our cars, and went back to Champaign, Illinois. By the time we got to the governor, I think his name was Evans back then, was on the TV. It was all over the news because we took the media with us. We wanted the people to know that we were not going to put up with that anymore. We wanted it to stop, not just here, but nationwide. We took all the media we could find. It was on TV. I don't know what laws that were violated here, but he guaranteed his constituency, citizens of Illinois, that we would never leave the state. We'd be charged. And to date, a warrant has never been issued. They didn't know what to do. They certainly didn't want the publicity of arresting us and making a big trial out of it. That place is cemented over today. They found in a stockroom next to the graveyard over 1,500 more skeletons that they're shipping to museums and universities all over the world for studies. That was just a piece of this great warrior woman, Maria. She's one of hundreds, thousands of people that have taken on that issue. So I want Donnie here, her son, to know what a great mother, great warrior, Gichida-Kwe, we call them in our language, warrior women, that she was. She was part of that effort. And we'll never rest. We'll never rest until that work and that job is completed, because it's going on right now as I'm standing here. Hundreds of places. We went down along the Chattanooga River in Tennessee. I was taken out into an area where we found over 1,200 graves. They come in at night and they put up their little generators and their lights in the middle of the night, and they bring in their backhoes and they go right down, take the artifacts, take everything they want out, put the dirt back on, put the little plants and everything over them, they start growing again. Over 1,200 of them have been taken like that in the middle of the night. And today we have the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act because of that kind of work. So what I'm saying here today is all land here in the Americas was sacred to Indian people. And there were ceremonies done every day of the week just to walk on the land. And if there was a mistake made in any way in violation of our mother, we asked forgiveness. There are ceremonies for that. And we are getting back to that again today. The Sundance is flourishing. One of the greatest spiritual movements taking place in our part of the country is the Three Fire Society, the Potawatomi, the Ottawa, and the Chippewa have come together all over the Great Lakes area, all the way up into Canada. Hundreds and thousands of Indian people are coming together, whole families that have been separated and split up, wives and husbands, been split through the alcohol and the abuse that it brings, are now coming back together. They're sober. Children that can't even hardly speak are being initiated into that society again, because that's the way it was. And guess what? Our grandfathers promised us that would happen. Black Elk. How many people read Black Elk Speaks? Or any of the other stories, The Seven Rights? Black Elk was a little bitty boy, 12 years old. Right around Christmas in 1890, he heard these weapons of mass destruction going on miles away. 7th Cavalry had Bigfoot and his band surrounded. He heard that. He got on his horse and he rode fast as he could. When he got close, he could hear the women and children crying and screaming. He got up on this little hill and he looked down. He could see the women running through the ravines, being chased by the cavalry, and their heads swiped off. He saw their bellies being ripped open. He saw them parading with little babies on their unborn babies on bayonets. 12 years old. He wanted to ride right down there. He started crying. He wanted to go down. He was already a warrior. But they said the Creator, Mishom, would get you mine to Conchla. Talk to him. He said, Black Elk, you're going to be needed now more than ever. You have the power to heal. You're going to help your people. You can't go down there. Black Elk said that the sacred tree withered and died that day, and the sacred hoop of life was scattered. He rode off on his horse. He saw the destruction. He saw the Black Hills taken from them. He saw the alcohol. He saw the little housing projects. He saw the sicknesses, the smallpox. He saw all the different diseases come to his reservation. In 1935, Black Elk went back up on that same hill. He thought he was becoming feeble, kind of forgetful, couldn't remember things, couldn't do his ceremonies the way he wanted to. So he went back up on that hill to fast. He wanted to talk to the Creator again, the Spirit. He said on the third night of his fast, the Creator came to him, he said. And he said, I have failed, Grandfather. My people are dying, they're suffering. Tell me what I must do. And the Creator told him, no, Black Elk, you didn't fail. If you weren't for you, your people wouldn't be here today. And he said, somewhere down in that valley there, Wounded Knee, the roots of the sacred tree were still alive. And that Indian people from all nations, all colors of mankind, womankind, humankind, would come there. Soon, the Creator told him, and they would nourish the roots of that tree, and it would grow again. And the sacred hoop of life would come back together. I was in Wounded Knee in 1973, and there was a man there by the name of Black Elk. Wallace Black Elk told us that dream, told us that vision, and he told us that was a fulfillment. That the occupation of Wounded Knee was actually a fulfillment of that prophecy. And today our Sundance is back. Our Medewan Lodge is back. When the American Indian Movement formed, Devery was just a little guy then. We used to go to St. Stephen's Church, remember? Had powwows. 2 old ladies came from Red Lake with jingle dresses. Our little boys, they had breechcloths. That's all they had, some bells tied around their ankles. The rest of them had Levi's on. 2, 3 girls had shawls. Last year I went out to the Comitson powwow out in Pequots up by Hartford, Connecticut. Guess what their budget was? $2.5 million. They had 150 drums showed up. This is just 34 years later. 150 drums. They had to pay 80 drums just to set out. They would never get to sing. I was sitting up at a podium. I was a guest of honor, and I was sitting by with all the elders of Pequot. They started the grand. They had to take 2 monsters, 3 times, about 4 times the length of this building here. These big circus tents, and they had to put them all together to accommodate the crowd. Took 2.5 hours for the grand entry. 2.5 hours. Thousands. Dancers, some elaborate dresses. Some of that cost $10,000 to make outfits like that today. And I'm sitting up there and I'm thinking about St. Stephen's Church and these little powwows that we started, American Indian movement, when people said we had to forget about the past and think about the future. Our own people were laughing at us. And when the drum and dancers come in, all I could see was eagle plumes. Looked like a wave, like an ocean of eagle plumes and feathers coming in. And I just closed my eyes and started to cry. I thought about Black Elk. I thought about the dreams, the visions he had. And that sacred tree is growing today. And that sacred hoop of life. And we're not just talking about Indian people here. He talked about generations. They said generations from the time of treaty. Almost every tribe, nation has those prophecies. They talked about the stage of suffering that we'd go through. 5 generations. And they talked about the drums would be heard again. Little fires would burn again. That was the American Indian movement. That was the American Indian movement. Brought back the drums. Brought back the center of the universe. And as my children, my grandson's mother, they're the ones that go to Harvard School today, learned about being Indian, learned the ceremonies, the sacraments, the way of life. Then it's the grandchildren. They're the 7th generation. It's your children. It's that little one sleeping there. That's the generation that our grandfathers talked about. When our great leaders, our chiefs and our doctors and our great scientists would come back. And they're not just saying Indians. White, yellow, black, red are coming back. They can go to gatherings like this and learn today. They were forbidden to even be near us or around us at one time. But they can learn all those things today. So I long for the day, and I know that day is coming, when all mankind will have respect once again for sacred land and sacred places. Because it'll happen through seminars and gatherings like this. And I want to thank the University here of Iowa, especially the young, beautiful students here. When we had that demonstration up in St. Paul, they came. They came all the way from Iowa to show their support. And I want to thank you here publicly for doing that. I want to thank this young man that you hold this lecture series, this symposium in honor of. And those here at the university, I just wish sometimes that the head chancellors and the superintendents, or whatever you call them, that they too would show up and not just come to a powwow and think they saw it all. That they too would start learning. But I have great faith in our youth today that are going to school. And I know that they'll bring back and complete that sacred hoop of life that withered and died in Wounded Knee in 1890. Miigwech. Have a good night. I have some literature out here, and there's some brief history of the American Indian movement. I wish you'd pick that up. There's a pamphlet on the racism in sports and media, and we have some T-shirts and some patches and other stuff that we sell to support our youth activities program, our intervention, prevention programs. And I wanted to just add that, a lot of times when people hear about the American Indian movement, they hear about Wounded Knee, and a lot of attention is focused on protests and demonstrations, but I'm also the founder and president of the Major Job Training Program, one of the foremost job training programs in the nation, perhaps the world. As Dr. Leon Sullivan, the founder of OIC's America, said, we have trained over 20 years, we have trained over 24,000 Indian people. We have taken over 18,000 off of welfare rolls and put them on payrolls. I'm also the founder and president of the Legal Rights Center, and we have handled over 36,000 indigenous clients in 34 years. There are federal judges on the bench today that actually worked for me. at one time, such as Michael Davis, who arrived at the hunting rights, fishing rights decision that went all the way to the Supreme Court and was upheld. When people ask Michael Davis, how'd you learn so much about treaty rights to make that decision? And he'll point and say, I learned it from that guy right there. We used to go to breakfast together and he would tell me about the corruption within the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the federal government. Stories I couldn't believe. I had to go back and study and find out the truth, and it was the truth. So we operate those kinds of programs. We have our own Native American community clinics. We have a first survival school in the system in America, alternative school. We graduate more Indian students from Heart of the Earth Survival School in Minneapolis and the whole public school system as far as Indians are concerned. Yet we deal with the kids that are 2 or 3 grades sometimes behind in reading. How do we do it? By making them feel good about who they are. Every Monday morning we have circle time. We bring out the pipe, the drum. We pray and we sage. We sing, we dance before we go to school. We talk about testing that's coming up and how important it is for all of them to be ready and prepared for that. That's the attention that they never get in the public school system. They're the ones that are pushed out. They're not dropouts. They push them out. They don't want. They can't deal with them. Or we go to juvenile court to get them. I just wanted to say that because a lot of times they equate the American Indian movement with activism ain't bad. I've been kind of downgraded to an activist. You know, I used to be a terrorist, communist, all the things J. Edgar Hoover used to say about us. So now I'm just an activist. I must be getting older or something. But, you know, we provide help and security and force and support to our people no matter where we go and where we travel today. So I just wanted you to know that, and you can find all that history when you leave here if you don't have it. Rich, any questions? I'll try to answer.
At this time, we'd like to present you as a small token of our appreciation, one of this year's t-shirts.
Oh, wow. Any questions? I'll try to answer them. I'll turn them over to Deborah here.
Come up to the mic so you get the recording.
Any questions, concerns, thoughts, comments? There's a mic there if anyone wants to use it. I know I get a little lengthy when I talk, so I don't, you know, I never wrote a speech in my life. I'm just talking from experience and what I lived and what I grew up live with. So I get a little carried away, but I could talk for days, obviously, and not touch on all the issues that I wanted to talk about here tonight. If there are no questions, I want to thank you once again for allowing me to be here with you.